Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program this evening. I am so excited about this program. And firstly, I'd like to say Happy New Year to you all. I know that last year has been so challenging for so many people. We've gone through situations that no one would have imagined. But thank God we made it through. We're into the new year, and we need to start this new year with a big bang. And that's exactly what we're doing. And I'm really happy that today I'm talking about productivity principles. These are some of the principles that I have used over the years, and I've waited this long to start to talk about these things. And again, like people say, you have to test some of these principles, make sure they work, make sure they deliver the results that they're supposed to deliver. Now, I'm going to be on this series every Monday in the month of January. And we're going to have some guests that are going to join us. I'm starting with the principles, and then we go into the practical aspect of things. So we're going to invite people who are experts on productivity, who can help us to get us to the next stage of things that we want to do. And I'm really sure it's going to be an exciting time. There are going to be some principles you would go away with, and there will be practical steps as well. And as I showed in the advert, I'm going to be using this book that I wrote originally in 2012. And I've waited this long, like I said, to start to talk about the principles that I have used in my life from 2012 to date. And these are things that have produced results time after time after time. Please share the links. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Please share the links, invite your friends to join us. It's going to be an exciting one today. Thank you for joining. So, Spirit of Workmanship. The first thing that people ask me is, Akin, why the book Spirit of Workmanship? And I'll tell you the story because it happened at a time when I was going through a really difficult time. There were major projects that were going on. They were not really working the way I wanted them to. I had a lot of ideas, business ideas that I wanted to get off the ground, and they were not really moving the way I wanted them to. So I thought, how do I get around this? And like people say, I'm a church boy. My father, the priest, my grandfather, a priest, on my father's side, on my mother's side, the same thing. My grandfather was a bishop. So I come from this lineage of people who have been in church and followed the message in church. So for me, it was no surprise that I was um, at a prayer meeting, at a church meeting, and these ideas started to come up in my mind. And I think that's an important point because, as you would see as I go on, there's some points around what triggers innovation for you. And it's something that you will need to think about as you think about what you want to do in terms of productivity. Your innovation triggers are quite important. But I sat in this prayer meeting, someone was talking, they were talking about the prayer points. But all that was in my mind was, God, how do I get to the answers that I need? The things that are practical, that I can take away and use when I get back to the office the following day. And these were some of the things I talk about in this book. What can I use when I get to the office the following day? And there's a scripture that we pray about a lot. And that's the scripture that talks about God open the eyes of our understanding, give us the spirit of wisdom, give us the spirit of revelation. And what we really mean when we pray that prayer in church is that, look, I'm going to read the Bible, but I need insight from what I read that will translate into actionable step in my work and in my daily experience. So it's not just reading and not really understanding, but it's reading, coming across insight that you can then take away and use in your daily life. And I came across that scripture that said, the spirit of wisdom, pray that God will grant you the spirit of wisdom and the spirit of revelation. And I had this nudge, which I believe was God, to stop, read that again properly. And I read it again and again and again, and I still did not get anything different until suddenly, I must have read it about 5, 6, 7 times. I just kept reading that, and that passage is in Ephesians chapter 1. And I had been reading it probably about 5, 6 times until suddenly something broke in my mind and I saw it. The scripture talks about the spirit of wisdom and revelation. And the insight I got was this: he did not pray for wisdom, he did not pray for revelation. He prayed for the spirit of wisdom and the spirit of revelation. And that was the beginning for me. What is the difference, you may say? Well, the difference is this: one approaches that from a consumer point of view, and the other one approaches it from a producer point of view. The spirit of wisdom produces wisdom, the spirit of revelation produces revelation. And I caught it. And what God was saying to me at that point was this: look, don't just be a consumer of wise counsel, be a producer. And that mentality has been working in my mind since that time in 2012 or thereabout. Always going with a producer mentality. How do I produce something here? How do I add value to what is happening around me? How do I make sure that I am leaving somewhere better than how I met it? And that was how I started thinking about this concept of being a producer of wisdom, a producer of revelation, and not just someone who consumes wisdom or someone who consumes revelation. Now, consuming it is not necessarily bad, right? We need that balance in life. Somebody needs to consume, somebody needs to produce, but we've got to be both in what we do, not just one area. Both areas need to come together. So, what did I do? As I started to think about that, I started to look more in scriptures to find out I'm a professional. I work. I go into the city every week, every day. I'm doing the stuff I need to do in the city. How do I take the knowledge I have there and translate it into something that works when I'm in my office, when I'm faced with a challenge in the office? What do I do? And as I started to think about it, I thought, hang on, if I missed the spirit of wisdom and I missed the spirit of revelation, where I had focused more on the product than what was producing the product, maybe I had missed other things. And I was right. I had missed other things. There were about 37 different descriptions of spirit of something. So now I started to look at those things from the content producing perspective, not just from being a consumer of this. I know that's one of the things I write in the book. And I say, too many of us Christians are consumers of wisdom and revelation. But what have we received ourselves? And now listen to this. This is important. We draw more confidence from the truths we discover ourselves than something that's passed to us from someone else. We draw more from it. We take time to go away to study about a particular area, and then we come back and we start to use those principles in what we do. So, what I'm going to do in this introductory session is this: I'm going to take us through about 4 key points that are important when we address productivity. And I will talk about 3 things that we need to do that will bring transformation. And then we'll continue on this next week, Monday. And the foundation is this. There's a lot more in the book. Book is available on all online platforms as an ebook. You can get there. But the starting point is this: both positive and negative thoughts require us to do something to convert them to the tangible equivalent. Both of them. What does that mean? If something negative is happening, a lot of times it's because the mind has dwelt a lot more on the negative. We've incubated the negative thought, and we've allowed the negative thought to build up until it becomes a stronghold most of the time. But the same effort we had expended on that negative point is the same thing we could have used on the positive one. To a degree, one could argue that producing results with the positive thoughts is actually a lot easier than doing it with the negative thoughts. There's this story I've read a lot of times of a man who was given a talent. And the man said, "Look, I know this boss. He reaps where he doesn't sow. He's going to come back to me. He's going to want his talent. And I am not sure I can produce results with it." Now, what did that parable say? What this person did, he took the talent, he went somewhere, he started to dig a hole, and he put the talent in the hole until the master came back. So he could then go, take the talent from the hole, and give it to the master. What does that mean? This is this: it took significant effort to dig a hole to put that talent in there. So everybody has got in them the ability to produce results with what they have. If we're not producing results, it takes effort to bury the gift that we have in us. It's not something that just happens naturally. It's not something that happens because the circumstances around me led to that. No, it's something that happens because we went along with the process that created the negative outcome. I've seen this time and time and time again. So your mind is built by God to deal with the positive and the negative. I could almost say that the mind sometimes may not be able to distinguish between what is good, what is bad. Imagine this: you are trying to bake a cake. The oven is not going to decide if you got the recipe right or wrong. No. You put that mixture in the oven, and what happens? After a while, you pull it out, and then you discover that something is wrong. You discover that something is missing. So, a lot of times, it's when things start to manifest that we notice the flaws in the thought, that we notice the flaws in what we're doing. And we need to build on this to get us to a point where we are constantly productive. So when you are reimagining productivity, the starting point is to check the mind. What is in my mind? How do I think? Why do I think the way that I think? And I'll say this, which is my second point. I used to think that thoughts were the foundation for productivity, right? Until I started to rethink it. And I have changed my mind on that point because thinking does not happen in isolation. You don't think the way you think just because you want to think that way. No, you think the way you think because something on the outside has been a stimulus to what you're doing. Something triggered you thinking that way. Something did. Something did. Maybe something you saw. Maybe something you heard somebody say. Maybe some thoughts came to you in a book you were reading. Maybe it's an experience you've gone through. Something always triggers thought. So, the environment around you, what you surround yourself with, plays a huge role in defining how you think. It plays a huge role in defining how you think. I remember so many times, I've just given you an example. I sat down in a prayer meeting and an idea came. I saw this context of the spirit of revelation, the spirit of wisdom. I shouldn't be a consumer only, but I should also think about how I produce things that will bring solutions to what other people are going through. And as I thought about that, and the more I thought about it, the more I put myself in environments where I could relate with what was going on, the idea started to broaden in my mind. I started to look at situations differently. I started to see and hear things differently. And that's an important thing. As soon as this thought came into my mind, every other thing in my environment started to align to fit into the context of what I had seen. Now, those things had always been there. They had always been there. The only thing that was different, a thought had entered into my mind, which now meant I could identify those things as they were happening. I could identify them. So, the first thing, know that your mind is like an oven. It takes whatever you put in there. If you put thoughts that are defeatist, if you put thoughts that are negative, it will bake the thoughts and it will give you out a product. If you do the same thing with positive thoughts, you will get the results. The second point, your environment plays a significant role in deciding what you think about and how you think. The third thing, which is a major point, is this: your thoughts are the seed for greatness. Now, some weeks ago, I think, uh, we were having a discussion at home, and one of the children mentioned something from the book of Hebrews chapter 12. And it's this story that talks about in Hebrews 12, I think it's verse 1 and 2 or so, where it says, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. And the insight was really simple and very basic. If there is a point of an author and there is a point where there is a finisher, then your faith must have a start and a finish point regarding any issue you are trying to address. How do I translate that into something that I can use in the office? How do I translate that to something that I can use on a business, in a business meeting, in a project, for example? How do I translate that? Well, what I did was this. If I need to look for the point where there is an author, and I need to look for the point where there is a finisher, What is my goal? At what point do I get involved in something? And at what point do I exit that thing? Very simple point. Just brought again a couple of weeks ago, re-emphasizing this point. Listen, every great idea out there was once untested. Every great product that you see was once untested. The question is this: if you throw away the idea or you throw away the thought, you are throwing away the product. And listen, it is products that change people's lives. It is products. It is what you create that will change people's lives. So I had a thought many years back. That thought crystallized into a book. The book is blessing people across the nations of the world. Very simple. Take your thought, use the seed of your thought to create a product. Now, that may sound easy. The truth of the matter is, it may not be as easy as it sounds. Now, how do you take that thought, recognize it as a seed, and go out to create products and services that other people can consume? How do you do that? Think about it this way. Everybody who's had ideas, take any of the big companies out there, any of the big products. Somebody somewhere sat down and said, this thing that I've got, it's an idea. There is a problem out there that we can solve. And then they take that idea, they start to play around with the idea, they start to mold the idea in their mind. They check the idea for validity. You see, as soon as you put those thoughts to critical evaluation, you start to figure out, is this going anywhere? But more importantly, you're checking if it's going anywhere at that season of your life. At that season. And you see, when we have thoughts, sometimes we're so quick to write off the thoughts. We're so quick to say, oh, it's nothing. Well, it may be nothing today, but that may be because it hasn't connected with the thought you're going to have tomorrow. It's because it hasn't connected with the thought you're going to have 2 days, 3 days, 4 days from now. What does that mean? Take your thoughts as much as you can, put them down as seeds, like you would put a seed in a bag. And you then start to think about your end goal. Where do I want to be in future? Who do I want to be in future? If you don't like the situation you are in today, how do I change this thing? What are the steps I can take to change this thing? As you think about it that way, then you go away. You start to take some of these thoughts, and you're thinking, okay, what do I do with it? What led me to move to create this book as an ebook? Because people started talking about it. And I was thinking, we've got the pandemic. This, the information in here will change someone's life. People are starting to talk about this thing. How do I get the book to them? Oh, I created a model at the time. That means I can take what I had, convert it to a different form, and make it more accessible to people. Now, the thoughts we had then are still coming relevant today. So it's one of the most important points I can mention. Take your thoughts and consider them as a seed. Now, remember, I said this, that you have the start, you have the finish. Build the finish, Get that picture in your mind, and then think about the steps that will get you to the end picture. The interesting thing is this, and this is how I go about this. If I've got projects to do or things to do, I spend some quality time sitting down, shutting my eyes, thinking about the thing, and I'm looking through different situations. I'm navigating different options of how I can achieve the end goal that I'm looking for. Think about it this way. You are going from point A to point B. Maybe you are flying from the UK, you are flying to the US, or you're flying to any other country. You're flying between two countries. Sometimes you have to go to a stopover country before getting to your destination. Sometimes you have to go to 2 or 3 points before getting to your destination. Think about it that way. Your destination was always your destination from the start. You never lost sight of that. However, when you were looking for the ticket that was going to get you to your destination, you were considering, I could go through this place, I could go through that place, I could go through that place. And that's how it works for me. I put it in my mind, I roll it round in my mind until I figure out exactly where it is I need to go. What is that picture of that final thing that I'm looking for? Is the cost of it right? Is the quality right? Where am I getting the raw material from? Who are the people that I need to interact with to make that thing the right product that I need? As soon as those things tie up in my mind, I know straight away that I have it. Guess what? At that point, I haven't spent any money. All I've done, I've spent imagination. I've spent imagination. And I remember somebody saying a story about this. I think it was one a surgeon in the United States at the time when they asked him, "How come you are as successful as you are with all the surgeries you do and how you're separating conjoined twins?" And he said, "Oh, very simple, very simple. I go into the operating room, I grab a chair, I sit down, I shut my eyes, and I perform the operation. And as I'm performing the operation, I'm asking the nurse and the other doctors, can you give me this instrument? Can you give me that instrument? Sometimes I go in based on all the medical records that are put before me. I go in, and as I start to do that in my mind, I hit a complication, and I know that don't do that in real life. If you do that in real life, you're going to kill that patient. And he said he would go through that in his mind again and again and again until he hits the result that he needs. Only then does he go into the theater to carry out that surgery. Think about it that way when you're thinking about productivity. Initially, it may feel like it's something that's going to take time, and it will take time, but continue with it. The more you continue with it, the more your mind will start to frame itself to work in that way. And after a while, you become proficient. Sometimes you sit down and it only takes minutes. You just get the answer. There it is. You just get the answer. Now, coming from a church background, you get the answer, you go to God. Is this the right one for me to do? Or should I do something else? And this is another important point that I want to raise, particularly around thoughts. You think a certain way doesn't mean your way is the only way to a right result. It doesn't. There may be other ways of getting to the right result. And if somebody comes to you and they say, hey, don't do that way, do this way, it doesn't necessarily mean your way is wrong. And it doesn't necessarily mean their way is wrong and you are right. That's a big mistake we make. We always think for us to be right, the other person must be wrong. Think about it this way. How many banking institutions do we have there? So many. Fundamentally, they do the same thing. However, as you start to look into their services and their products, you will notice differences. Imagine if every banker had said, my way is the only way of doing banking. No. If you look at the number of garment makers out there, can you imagine somebody saying that your way of designing a piece of a jacket is the only way? No, you can't. So the fact that somebody comes in and tells you that the way you're doing it is wrong doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It just means they've not seen your way. Now, the balance of that is this: you need to go back. You need to make sure you are going the right way based on what you have seen. Based on what you have seen. Now, you don't have to have seen something that's exactly the same as what other people have seen. No. You just need to make sure that what you are seeing is consistent with the steps that you are taking to get there. If you need to adjust your product to fit into the realities, then of course do adjust your products to fit with the realities. And that is very important on that point. So remember this: your seed, your thoughts are the seeds for greatness. If you kill the thoughts, then you're killing the product. Products don't come out of anywhere, they come out of seeds. Somebody somewhere planted a seed. As the seed started to grow, they started to notice things, they started to make adjustments, and it led to productivity in what they were doing. Now, the last point I want to mention in terms of key principles here, again, this is just an introductory session here. It's this point. My last point on that is this: good does not happen because evil is absent. Good does not happen because evil is absent. What do I mean by that? A lot of times I noticed this, and even in what I used to do, I used to wait for the circumstances to be right. I used to wait for everything to tie up together. I used to wait for, okay, I need to get this, I need to get that, I need to get that, I need to get that together for me to move. For some of you who come from some cultures, we want to get rid of every single devil in the way before we move. Hey, guess what? When God started, the earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. Guess what he did? He moved on anyway. He moved on anyway. The question is this: are you always waiting for the circumstances to be just right? And you are letting that keep you in a situation of inaction? Then that's problematic. And you know why it's problematic? Quite interesting. I've started so many projects, and as we go along, something pops up, and I realize I need to shift. I need to change. What we thought was going to happen is not what is happening, and therefore I need to change. The thing is this: I would never have known that thing if I had not changed my perspective. When you move, you change perspective. When you move, you change perspective. And that's important. That's important. If you don't move, your perspective will always remain the same because you're always looking in the same direction. If I want to see what's behind me, okay, of course, there's a monitor in front of me so I can see what's behind me because the camera is reflecting it. But if I didn't have a camera in front of me, I wouldn't be able to see those pictures. The only way to see them is to turn my head around. That's the only way to see them. So you either physically move yourself or have something in your environment that gives you perspective. Once perspective comes, you find yourself in a position where you can move. But perspective is important. So listen to that point again. Good does not happen because evil is absent. No. Even in the midst of this pandemic, some people have been super, super successful and legitimately, right? Legitimately successful. They had been working on ideas, they had been working on plans, and a set of circumstances created themselves that was no making of theirs, but they were ready. They were ready. And they took advantage of what was going on at that time. Now, how do you overcome that process where it feels like there's darkness around? You know, somebody might be saying, Akin, but it's just so dark around. I don't know which way to go. I can't really see from where I am. You know what? If you've got your mind and that mind is functioning properly, what you can do is this: start to speak your way to what you want to see. Start to speak your way to it. Start to say to yourself, I'm going to run this business. I'm going to build this business. I'm going to create a product. And then you talk about what the product will do, right? You can be in a corner of a room while you're doing this. I'm going to create a business that's going to solve this problem. I went through pain trying to get this solution. I didn't have it. Now I'm going to solve that problem. I'm going to do something that's going to make it a lot easier for someone else to get the result in this area. Speak to yourself. It's one of the most powerful ways to get out of this thing, where there's like a cloud of darkness all over. And you know, darkness doesn't stop you from thinking. Darkness doesn't stop you from speaking. Darkness doesn't, once light comes on, straight away darkness moves. You would never put on a light somewhere and darkness says, I'm not going. No, no. So, how do you relate that to things at work? You may have a manager that's not a fantastic manager. You might have a company that's behaving in a certain way and people that behave in a certain way. A lot of times people get away, oh, they didn't treat me well, they didn't do this well to me, they didn't do that well to me. That may be true. But the way you respond to that is what you choose. The way you interpret that is what you choose. The way that translates to actions is based on what you do. You can look at the same situation that some people would have looked at and they would have said, this is just so bad. Some people look at it, they see opportunities. They see ways of moving to the next level in what they do. They see that. So good does not just happen because evil is absent. Good happens irrespective of the presence of evil. Irrespective of the presence of evil. It happens anyway. Now, what are some things you can do? Let me point out three things here. And I touched on one of these earlier. This is what I call your inspiration trigger. What is your inspiration trigger? How do you know what that is? How do you know what your inspiration trigger is? I tell you what I do. It requires a bit of analysis, right? Think back about the things you have been productive in. Think about those. Is there one thing that you think that thing went really well? What is your innovation trigger? Once you pick on that one thing that went really well, now you need to ask yourself, what did I do? What were the circumstances around that thing? So for me, I noticed this. Every time I went to a prayer meeting and I had a business idea in my mind, even when I didn't go there specifically for that business idea, I just went there seeking help. I just went there saying, I don't know the way to go with this thing, but I'm going to get an answer. Every time I did that, something always snapped. Every time I was in a secluded environment, quiet, those triggers would just go off. Those ideas will come. And I would write those ideas down. What I now started to do, I started to take deliberate steps to create the environment that triggers innovation in my mind. That's what I did. So sometimes I just say to the family, I'm off for the next 2 days. I'm off for the next 3 days. All I'm doing there, I'm just trying to get the mind to get back to the point where innovation comes. I just do that. And I noticed this way back. I was telling a story the other day. Um, I'm working on a particular project at the minute, and some ideas were coming from the program lead as she was teaching us on what to do. And I realized this. There were about 4 learning methods that were described from this model. For the last 20, 25 plus years of my life, I've only been using one of those models. One. And that one was not the one that adapted the most to my learning style. Oh, and I started to say to myself, but hang on, all these years, this is what I've been doing. And then I realized that, you see, the thing is this: things were happening around me. The innovation triggers were there, but my mind hadn't locked onto them. And because my mind hadn't locked onto them, I was losing out. I was losing out. Ideas for books will come, but then I lose out. As soon as my mind connected with this thing, the ideas just started to flow. They started to flow. They started to flow. A situation will present itself, and I would say, okay, well, I'm not really sure what I need to do here. Okay, what is my innovation trigger? Music. Sometimes I listen to music. Sometimes I go away to somewhere quiet. I move my head back. I listen. And in those quiet moments, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, in quietness and in confidence lies their strength. In quietness and in confidence. So that means you need to be quiet sometimes to get your innovation triggers to work. For some other people, it could be anything. It could be anything. Find out what yours is. Find out what your innovation trigger is. You see, because as soon as you get that innovation trigger, your productivity will move to another level altogether. Altogether. Now, I get ideas for books just like that. They just snap in my mind. They just snap in my mind. And before, I used to struggle and I say, what would I do? How am I going to write all these books? And I get these questions all the time. People are always saying, Akin, how do you do it? How do you do this stuff you do at work, in your businesses, How do you do it? It's what I'm telling you tonight. This innovation trigger is the answer to that thing. It's the answer. So that's important. Find out what your innovation trigger is. Some of the examples I've given you there. Think about the things you have done that have been successful. What happened? Why was that particular thing successful? Think about tests, right? Once you start to identify that thing, check it again. Does it work? Does it work? If it worked once, it worked again, keep checking, because you might be on to something. And that innovation trigger could be the next thing that you need to do. All right. The other point here in what you need to do, you need to critically evaluate how you think and what you think about. Remember, I said something about perspective earlier. A lot of times, the situation and the environment we're in locks our perspective in. It locks our perspective in, right? We only see one side. We only see that side. and we think that's the only side there is. But be critical about your own thoughts, right? It's not just going on social media and criticizing what other people are doing, what other people are saying. A lot of times, people do that because you are looking at them. If you were in their position and you were looking out, maybe your perspective will be different as well. So, what do? I take those ideas, I mold them in my mind, I work on them. Once I think this is starting to form into something, I think, okay, put that down as one route. What if that doesn't happen? Then what? Then I start to create an alternative in my mind. As you do that and you're critical about your own thoughts, you then bring all these alternatives together, right? Do I buy that? Do I buy that? Do I buy that? What's important to you? That determines what you go for ultimately. You may want some of that, some of that, some of that. Bring all those things together. And suddenly you realize that you are hitting onto something, onto something. So it's important to critically evaluate your own thoughts. I think you've had this commonly said. We judge people by what they do. We judge ourselves by our intentions. We judge others by what they do. We judge ourselves by our intentions. That is super important. A lot of times, if we see our own actions, we will not like ourselves. We will criticize ourselves the way you are doing other people. We would. So look at the two sides, the three sides, the four sides. How many sides you have? Look at those things, and you'll be surprised the difference it would make. Now, the last point I want to touch on here is a very important one. And it's something that I have called the power of two. The power of two. That is so important. So important. The power of two. I remember many years back, there was this idea about, you know what, let's write a book. I want to write a book. I'd written my first book. I think the second one was developing out at the time. And then the idea dropped in my mind that why don't you start a publishing company? Why don't you start a publishing company? All these issues you went through when you were trying to publish your book, why don't you start something to eliminate all those issues? I looked at it and I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I called a friend. I said, let's do this thing together. Let's do it together. You see, so many ideas have failed because people have tried to do it themselves. They've tried to do it on their own. Oh, I must keep this idea. I'm going to build it myself in secret. I'm not going to let anybody know what's going on. Look, one will put 1,000 to flight. Two will put 10,000 to flight. The power of two is exponential. You cannot take your dream to the full potential of the dream without involving another person. No, you can't. So when you're talking about productivity, think about it this way. How do I take what I'm doing, break it down in a way that someone else can participate in what I am doing? You know, I'll never forget the story that someone shared with us once. And the person said this. The person said, look, I know you guys are doing all this stuff, but I feel that I can play a part in this thing. And you know, somebody's success is tied to your success, and your success is tied to someone else's success. So we need to think about it in this way. What am I thinking about? What am I creating? If I'm going to add other people to this thing, how am I going to do that? What's it going to be like? What part would I do? What part would they do? What part can I offload to someone else? And you see, this is quite interesting here, because more often than not, the part you have to get someone else to play is the part where you are weak in. So you are taking your vulnerable part and you are bringing in someone else's strength to compensate. You're bringing in someone else's strength to compensate. So when it comes to what we do in our publishing business, even though we would look at every book we do, the covers and everything, I don't make the call on that. I'm not the creative genius in what we do. There's someone else who's a creative genius. That's what they do. In fact, creativity just comes to them like that. It just comes to them like that. I'm saying, well, you are the good one when it comes to this. You do that. However, in the area that I'm good at, I do my stuff. And when I'm in my element, I do my stuff well. I do my stuff well. So the power of two is a very important thing. Very important. Make sure that whatever you do, the power of two plays a part. Now, I call it the power of two, but what I'm really saying is this: break down what you are doing in a way that other people can help, in a way that other people can contribute, and recognize the fact that it is their thing. It is their thing. You are contributing. The same way, if you use some of the principles I've talked about, where I've talked about the fact that don't just be a consumer, be a producer, right? You find out that you are also producing something for which someone else is going to be a contributing part. So it's not just something that you think I'm only ever going to be contributing in my own. That thing creates an imbalance in life. It creates an imbalance where everybody believes that I'm just receiving. No. Even when you look at certain things that we do in life, somebody is a giver, somebody is a receiver. He says it is more blessed to be the one producing than the one receiving. More blessed. More blessed. Because you know what to do. You've honed your skills in being a producer. You've gone through the process where things don't work. I say this a lot. If you take any of your biggest mentors, any of your best mentor, that this person, you are my mentor number one. What you've done, what you've achieved in life, you are the one giving me this idea. Look, whoever your role model is, at one point or another in their life, they were like you. At one point or another, they were like you. And that is super important. Where you are today is not a place to be ashamed of. Where you are today is a very good place to start your journey. It's a very good place. So, very quickly, the points are these. When you start, we're starting with the mind, and then we'll bring in the experts to deal with the practicalities and build these things out. These are experts who know how to do this thing. That's their job. They're productivity experts. But these principles are important. Think about your mind, the first thing. Both positive and negative thoughts require action. Think about your mind like an oven. Whatever you put into it, it's not the oven's responsibility to say the combination of these ingredients is wrong. No, that's not the oven that does that, right? But whatever you put in that oven, under heat, under pressure, it's going to produce a result. Whatever you do there. So that's important. The second thing, that thinking may not be as much a foundation for your growth as you think it is. Your environment may have a bigger part to play. Number three, your thoughts are your seed for greatness. You kill the seed, you kill the product. You kill the seed, you kill the product. Number four, good does not happen because evil is absent. Good will happen regardless. It will happen regardless. It is our consciousness in establishing good that makes evil irrelevant. And what are the three things you should do? Find your innovation trigger, critically evaluate how you think, and understand the power of two. Understand that. And I'm sure it's going to bring a great change in your life. It's going to spark that next thing you need to do to get to that next point in life. We've run out of time today. I'll be back here next week, Monday, and we're going to go through this session again. And like I said, I'm going to bring some guests to come in who are going to talk to us about productivity, talk us through the details of this thing and how it works. These are experts who can help you. You can talk to them and they would walk us through all these things on what you do, how you go through the steps, and you can be accountable to these people as you do what you do. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm sure that it's going to be an exciting time in 2021. There's so many events that we're doing this year. Last year has given us a very good foundation to build on things. And 2021, we're going to be stepping out. We're going to be moving out with more programming. We're expanding the programs that we give out. So thank you very much for joining the program today. See you again next week.